Keith Urban arrived at the Kelly Clarkson show with his usual warmth and effortless charm, ready to chat about his upcoming album and perform a stripped-down acoustic version of one of his new songs. Backstage, the vibe seemed relaxed. Kelly, a longtime friend in the industry, greeted him with a hug, and the crew prepared for a smooth, upbeat episode. But as the cameras rolled, a subtle tension began to build. The opening segment was lighthearted enough, full of laughter about old tour stories, but Kelly shifted gears with a question about recent comments Keith had made in an interview about the pressures of the music industry. "You said some artists these days are too focused on social media and not enough on the music," Kelly said, raising an eyebrow. "Care to elaborate?" Keith smiled politely, answering that he believed in authenticity and substance over image. Kelly chuckled, but pressed, "But aren't you one of the most image-conscious country stars out there?" The audience laughed, nervously at the unexpected edge in her tone, and Keith's smile tightened. Keith tried to laugh it off, steering the conversation back toward songwriting, but Kelly followed up with another pointed remark. "You've been in this business a long time? Don't you think it's a little hypocritical to criticize younger artists for doing exactly what you did when you were starting out?" Keith's eyes flickered, the first sign of irritation. "I never said I was perfect," he replied evenly, "but I've always tried to keep the music first." The audience reacted with a few claps, but Kelly leaned forward in her chair, almost playfully, but with an undeniable bite. "Come on, Keith, you've done your fair share of playing the game." The tension was now visible. The banter had shifted into something more like a challenge, and even the band members on stage seemed to sense it. The next segment featured fan questions, and one audience member asked about Keith's decision to turn down a recent televised award performance. Keith explained that the format didn't feel right for his music, but Kelly interjected, "Or maybe you just didn't want to be upstaged." The crowd let out an audible gasp, half laughing, half stunned. Keith's eyes narrowed slightly, and he said, "Kelly, you know me better than that." Kelly grinned. "I do, which is why I'm surprised you're being so sensitive." The remark drew a mixture of laughs and murmurs, and Keith sat back in his chair, clearly deciding how much to let slide. As the commercial break ended, Keith was visibly more guarded. The segment that followed was supposed to be a fun rapid-fire questions game, but Kelly's questions seemed deliberately pointed. "Biggest diva you've worked with? One celebrity you'll never collaborate with again?" Keith sidestepped the first and declined to answer the second, but Kelly pushed. "Oh, come on, just one name." Keith finally replied, "Not my style to call people out," but his tone was clipped. The audience clapped politely, but the playful energy had evaporated, replaced by a thin thread of awkwardness. Kelly then introduced a clip of Keith performing with another country star years ago, pausing the video to joke about a missed note. In the live performance, Keith chuckled, politely, but said, "Live music isn't perfect, that's the point," Kelly countered. "Or maybe you just didn't rehearse enough." The crowd reacted with another mix of laughter and discomfort. Keith leaned forward, elbows on his knees, looking directly at her. "You know, Kelly, you've been on enough stages to know better than that." The exchange drew gasps, and Kelly, smiling tightly, moved to the next topic. The tension came to a head when Kelly brought up a rumor about Keith turning down a collaboration with a popular pop star. Keith shook his head. "That's not true," he said firmly. Kelly, still smiling, replied, "That's not what I heard." Keith's voice dropped slightly. "Well, maybe you should check your sources." The audience reacted with a loud "oh," and for a moment, the two just stared at each other, neither willing to break eye contact. The interview limped toward Keith's scheduled performance. But before the band could start, Kelly made one last dig. "All right, let's see if you can handle this one without walking off." The audience erupted in shocked murmurs, and Keith froze for a second, clearly deciding whether to let it slide. Instead, he unclipped his microphone, set it on the coffee table, and stood up. "I think we're done here," he said calmly. The audience gasped and whispered as Keith turned toward the side of the stage. Kelly called after him, "Keith, come on, I'm just joking," but he didn't look back. The cameras caught the moment, as he walked past the band, out of frame, leaving the audience in stunned silence. Kelly turned back to the camera with an awkward smile, saying, "Well, that's a first." Backstage, Keith moved quickly toward the exit, brushing past producers who tried to stop him. "We can cut it if you want," one said, but Keith shook his head. "Doesn't matter. The moment's already out there." His tour manager was waiting by the side door, and without another word, they stepped into the waiting car. By the time the show wrapped, clips of the confrontation had already been posted online by audience members. Within an hour, #KeithUrban, #KellyClash, and #WalkOffKelly Clarkson were trending, with fans split between defending Keith's decision and accusing him of overreacting. For those who saw it live, the sight of one of country music's most easygoing stars calmly walking away was a shock, and proof that even the friendliest interviews can turn into viral flashpoints. The backstage area buzzed with tension as Keith Urban's abrupt exit sent the crew scrambling to figure out how to handle the situation. Kelly Clarkson was still on stage, shifting into the next segment with visible effort. But in the green room, a producer was already on the phone. With network executives, "We can spin it as playful banter gone wrong," someone suggested. But the video clips circulating online told a different story in them. Kelly's pointed remarks looked harsher, and Keith's calm but decisive walk-off seemed like a quiet protest. Keith sat in his dressing room for only a few minutes before his tour manager reminded him they had a radio interview across town. "Let's just go," Keith muttered, grabbing his jacket. He ignored the buzzing phone in his pocket. Dozens of missed calls, texts from fellow artists, and even a few reporters wanting a quote. On the ride away from the studio, Keith scrolled through social media, his jaw tightening as he saw headlines pop up. "Keith Urban storms off Kelly Clarkson show. Country star snaps at daytime host." Fans flooded his Instagram comments, some cheering him for standing up for himself, others criticizing him for being too sensitive. He took a deep breath, trying to remind himself that narratives spun out of control quickly, but the clip's reach was already staggering. "We're getting calls from Entertainment Tonight, TMZ, and People," his publicist said over the phone. "Do you want to comment?" Keith rubbed his temples. "Not yet. Let them talk. I'm not feeding the fire." Meanwhile, back at the studio, Kelly wrapped her show and retreated to her own dressing room, visibly unsettled. She replayed the interview in her head, wondering if she'd gone too far with the teasing. She'd known Keith for years. Their friendship was real, but the cameras had captured something that no amount of post-editing could erase. Her assistant walked in holding a tablet with trending tweets. Some fans were defending her humor, saying Keith had overreacted, but others were accusing her of disrespecting a guest and provoking drama for ratings. Kelly sighed. "Great, now it's a thing," she muttered, leaning back in her chair. By late afternoon, the story had exploded into mainstream news. Major entertainment outlets were running side-by-side stills of Keith standing up and Kelly's surprised expression. Commentators debated whether it was a publicity stunt or a genuine falling out. Some even dug up past interviews between the two, analyzing their banter for signs of underlying tension. In Nashville, radio DJs were discussing it on air, with callers passionately weighing in. One caller said, "Keith's the nicest guy in the industry. If he walked off, something had to be seriously wrong." Another countered, "Kelly's just keeping it real. Not everyone can handle her humor." That evening, Keith finally posted a short statement on his Instagram story. "Sometimes you've got to walk away. Respect matters." The simple, cryptic message fueled even more speculation. Fans interpreted it as a direct jab at Kelly, while others insisted it was just a general comment about boundaries. Kelly, perhaps feeling the pressure to respond, tweeted a few hours later, "Friends can disagree. I've got nothing but love for Keith." Her choice of words, disagree and love, didn't calm the chatter. Instead, it sparked another wave of debate over whether the two would ever appear together publicly again, cementing the incident as one of the most talked about talk show moments of the year. Wondering if she'd gone too far with the teasing. She'd known Keith for years. Their friendship was real. But the cameras had captured something that no amount of post-editing could erase. Her assistant walked in holding a tablet with trending tweets. Some fans were defending her humor, saying Keith had overreacted, but others were accusing her of disrespecting a guest and provoking drama for ratings. Kelly sighed. "Great, now it's a thing," she muttered, leaning back in. Her chair by late afternoon, the story had exploded into mainstream news. Major entertainment outlets were running side by side still Keith, standing up and surprise dug up past interviews between the two, analyzing their banter for signs of